Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the launch of For the Love of Community Engagement. Well, here we are, everyone. I would like to welcome people that are in Australia and New Zealand, Hong Kong, Vietnam, and say a big good morning to you. If you're in Canada or the USA, you're somewhere between good afternoon and good evening. And if you're in the UK, it's good evening to you. As you settle in, I would just like to welcome the team today that are here to launch this fabulous book again, For the Love of Community Engagement. My name is Amy Hubbard. Some of you definitely know me. I've looked at the RSVP list for this launch, and it is the who's who of community engagement around the world, whether you're with us live today or you're watching this later on. So I'm Amy. I'm joined today by Tiffany, who we worked quite closely together at Capire and on other things in life as well. And we're your host team. But most importantly, we're joined today by our very esteemed author, Becky Hurst, and Wendy Sarkissian, one of the most influential community engagement practitioners that we've ever worked with around the world. So we are so fortunate to have both Wendy and Becky, obviously, here today. I'm going to now hand over to Becky to do the acknowledgement. Thanks, Becky.
Thank you, Amy. Welcome, everybody. I want to, before we get into the session, just acknowledge that those of us here in Australia, are on land that wasn't originally ours. And I want to acknowledge that this land that we're on, wherever we are in Australia, was always Aboriginal land and always will be Aboriginal land. And I asked Amy if I could do the acknowledgement of country, just because I wanted to point to chapter 13 in the book. I talk about my own journey in understanding the need for reconciliation. And I think it's actually Reconciliation Week as well. So very apt that this is happening during Reconciliation Week. So if you haven't read chapter 13 yet, please make that your priority this week. And if you're elsewhere in the world, which I know a number of you are, please learn something about the history of Australia and what happened over the last couple of hundred years, because that we need to get the word out and begin that reconciliation journey. Thank you, Amy.
And I also would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of land where I am today in Northcote in Melbourne, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And if you'd like to acknowledge where you are and the traditional custodians, put it in chat, because we love to see where people are distributed around Australia or New Zealand or wherever you may be in the world, and the people or communities you would like to acknowledge. So Becky, is there someone else that you would like to acknowledge as an important part of the journey of why we're here?
Yeah, absolutely. I would actually like to acknowledge all of our absent friends and colleagues. I particularly want to acknowledge Melita Kimber, or Melita Froylan was her married name, who the book is dedicated to. Melita was a former colleague and friend of mine. Sadly, we lost Melita after a short illness with pancreatic cancer last year. She really inspired me. Losing Melita really inspired me. She inspired me when she was alive as well, as a practitioner. And I just really want to flag that there are people that have gone before us, all of us, whether in our personal life or professional life, that shape who we are and the things that we do. And so I don't want to leave the note sort of down here, though. I want to say that Melita, of all people, would have been so impressed that we just had the opening music of one singular sensation for this. So Melita herself would be dancing to this. But yeah, to absent friends and colleagues.
Thanks, Becky. Okay, so just in terms of a few housekeeping items, we are recording today. You may have had an icon come up on your screen before, and that's because quite a few people can't be here. You know, those pesky things called time zones around the world means it's 3 a.m. or somewhere. It was definitely 3 a.m. somewhere. So we are recording it for that person and a whole lot of other people as well. If your Zoom freezes, please leave and come back in. After 12 months of various states of lockdown, 12 plus months, and using Zoom on a day-to-day basis, that is the way that we troubleshoot Zoom. Leave, come back in. But if you need support, Tiffany, who you all met before, is here to help, and you can contact Tiffany in the chat. She'll also be coordinating chat, and we want you to use chat. Chat is kind of the discussion that you'll be having in the corners while Becky's saying a few things, having a few more discussions with Wendy. Please use chat for your kind of comments, observations. But we also have the Q&A tool. And so the Q&A tool is for you to ask questions. Sometimes people do use the Q&A tool, especially in community engagement, but sometimes we also find those questions in the chat. We'll look at both of those when we move into the more conversation part of this launch. I wanted to emphasize this is a safe space, okay? We're going to have a bit of a conversation about the book. We're going to be asking questions. I've got some questions for Becky and for Wendy. You'll have questions. You might want to make some observations about community engagement practice. Oh, the love of, maybe. It's safe. Okay, it is safe. We're here to support you. I think that's it in terms of housekeeping, troubleshooting. Let's move into the launch. It is why we are here. Now, if you have a copy of The Love of Community Engagement and you flick through to sort of the back of the book, there's some amazing biographies about Becky and Wendy and their journeys. And I was going to put a summary together of them. And what I came up with was esteemed practitioners, and I've said that before, internationally renowned. They're authors, both of them, they're authors. Both of them are mentors, leaders, public speakers, but only one studied contemporary dance and only one built an eco house in Nimbin. Can you tell who is who? We don't have a prize, but who in chat, who did the contemporary dance? And it wasn't me. I am standing here today because I learnt that from Becky last March. Stand up when facilitating online. That was one thing I learnt from Becky. So who was, Becky, I think is that Max Hardy? Becky Hurst for sure. Wendy did contemporary dance. Controversial, we can tell by your moves, Wendy. Anyway, there's so much to know about both Becky and Wendy, but you'll have an opportunity to ask them about their own journeys and why we're here today. I'm just going to remind you all, in some of the communications around this launch, we did use a hashtag for the love of community engagement. If you are on the socials today, right now, or after the event, you want to talk about this session, please just use that hashtag. Tiff is going to drop it in chat so it's there and ready to go for you. All right, without further ado, Becky, why did you write a book? Like, really? You wrote a book. You went there, you wrote a book.
I still can't quite believe it. I wrote a book, and actually preparing for today, last night, I actually got into bed and I thought, I'm going to pick up my book from my bedside table and try and let it sink in that I've actually written a book, because I'm not quite sure how it happened, but it did. But why did I write a book? That's a really good question, and a very serious one. I am 22 years. I know I don't look old enough. 22 years into my career, and I was kind of like with my little backpack on, collecting all these stories along the way, positive stories and not so positive stories. And they were kind of whirling around in my head. And I knew I wanted to write a book at some point. And the moment presented itself for one reason or another in my personal life. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to just start writing this. I'm going to start getting these things that are in my head down on paper. Now, as Wendy has started to realize, and I think now people have seen what I've written in the book, I'm a very, very reflective person, very reflective, deep thinking practitioner, even though I come across as incredibly one singular sensation, I'm actually incredibly reflective, incredibly deep. And I wanted to really try and get an understanding of my own approach to community engagement, because the more and more I'm working in community engagement, the more people are telling me that my approach is slightly different, or I've got a different way of doing things, or I'm fresh, or I'm contemporary. And I was really grappling with what that meant. So I really wanted to unpack what it was about me that made my practice not stand out necessarily, or maybe stand out. And so I started this process of writing the book, got all of these stories down on paper, and then they started to form into these kind of 20 insights, the 20 chapters, which really now are for me that kind of, it's a beautiful summary really of my approach to engagement and what I believe in. And it's also 20 things that we can move forward with into the future. And so that really is why I wrote the book. As I was writing the book, and as Wendy, and we'll talk to Wendy in a sec, I'm sure, about, we were doing the editing process and we were talking about it, it started to dawn on me how urgent this was and how good a timing it was that I decided to write this book about my own practice, because the more and more I think about it, the more and more worried I'm getting that community engagement is heading down a path that I don't like and that I don't feel comfortable with. And so in the process of writing the book, we started using this term of we're applying an emergency brake. We actually need to use this as an opportunity to say, stop what we're doing, everybody, pens down. Let's take a look at our approaches. Is this what we want for community engagement? And let's think about the next 10 years, the next 20 years, the next 30 years. Where do we want this relationship between community and government or corporations? Where do we want it to be going? And I know where I want it to be going. So that's why I wrote the book.
Okay, not going to script here at all, Becky, but when I read the book, I thought this is a book for people that throw around that term community engagement all the time. That they're probably working in something like communications, risk management, public relations, communications, strategic communications, all of that kind of end of the spectrum. So when I read the book, I was like, oh my God, they should be reading that. So then they know what community engagement is, because community engagement is something very different to risk management, communications, risk management. Okay, so that's one audience. To educate people about really what community engagement is. Who are the other audiences that you had in mind? I know it's like a collection of thoughts, but who were you thinking about the audience?
I am. So I've written as you do when you need to start marketing a book, you write down your audience. Yeah, absolutely. People that are working in public sector roles, even in private sector as consultants. Then I realized that students would be an ideal audience for this, because it really getting in when they're learning about engagement and what engagement should be with communities. This would be good. And then there's various people in between, but you know who I really, really, really want to read this is politicians. I want the politicians and those people that are in those positions of power to be reading it. And this is going to be the sort of challenge from here on, is how I get this book and these concepts in front of the politicians, and not just the politicians, but the politicians and their advisors. In fact, their advisors are more influential than they are. And so I really want, if anybody out there can hook me up, send a copy of my book to their local MP and get them to read it and get them to understand it and get them to reflect on their own practice. That would be my dream come true. And reading your book, the social outcomes, there's a real emphasis on social outcomes, and I think that's what's really missing in a lot of community engagement practice at the moment. We've got a couple of comments in chat. Duncan said generally people don't know what community engagement is. No, exactly. Ray, hello Ray. Communication is not community engagement. No, it's not. Let's move on. There's a whole debate there, and if anyone wants to actually orchestrate about a debate around the definition of community engagement, you've got your panelists right here. Wendy, you wrote the foreword, and then you helped with the editing. You have to go off mute. Remember to go off mute. Tell us about your journey with this, and where are you today? Because you're definitely not down in the Southern Hemisphere. Where are you?
I'm in Canada. I'm in Vancouver. And I was so enthusiastic about buying this book that I actually bought 2 copies by accident. So if there's a Canadian who can write their postal address in the chat, I'll send it to you. Okay, so that's a freebie from me. I mean, much as I love it, really, I can only read one at a time. So what was it like for me? Well, actually, what I had to do is I had to deal with my perceptions of Becky to begin with, too. First of all, she is young and social media savvy. That meant that she was quite different from me, being old and not social media savvy. And I was frankly petrified of this woman until I spent an entire week drinking myself practically into a coma, I think it was, in her pre-drinking era, and learning about how she really felt about community engagement and where she'd come from. And then what I realized was that she had a depth of understanding that really I yearned for all my working career. That I couldn't get anybody to take this matter seriously. You know, like this, we're talking about people's lives here. Like, it's a very serious matter. And I think you can be light about it too, but you can't be shallow. It's just much, much too important. And so when we started having these a whole week of in-depth conversations, I began to understand that I'd found basically a professional soulmate. And she was of a younger generation, but she got it. She absolutely got it, that this was a serious matter. It was a political matter. It was a matter about empowerment and agency. And we couldn't do this work if we felt that it was going to go nowhere, and that people up the line, our clients and bosses, would ignore what we were coming up with. And I think that's what really did it for me. I saw beyond the bubbles pretty quickly, but it took a while, quite a lot of deep conversations. And then the minute that you suggested doing a book, I just thought, this is just heaven on a stick. I work as an editor, right? Didn't need much, right? I don't think I ever suggested any content ever, moved the odd semicolon around, but essentially she had the book and all of a sudden it was there. I thought, oh, well, I've got a few months of rest here before I'm going to be editing this. It was there like in a week. We were doing it.
Yeah, but Wendy, you did push me. I have to say, I wasn't sharing it. And then Wendy, I was saying, I've written a few pages, and Wendy said, you've got to send it to me, Becky. And I was like, no, I daren't send it to you. It's not worth anybody else reading. And Wendy, she said the words, she said, Becky, for somebody that's so into collaboration and working together, you really should share this book. And so I did, I sent it to her, and that's where it started.
And I think there's one other thing for the women in our group. And I suspect we might have maybe more women than men, hard to judge here. For the women in our group, I do think we were also confronting the issue of the imposter syndrome. That so often when a woman and a young woman decides to go into print, there's a terrible sinking feeling in your gut. Is this crap? Am I a wanker? I mean, is this just crap? And will they tolerate me? Will they humor me? But will they really think it's crap?
Yeah.
And so I suppose at one level, I was your bullshit detector, right?
You were, and you've told me so many times that it's really, really good. And even now I'm getting hundreds of messages from people saying it's really, really good. And yet I am a total victim of imposter syndrome. I'm waiting for someone to say it's a load of rubbish. And I still look at myself and think, no, I think someone's going to catch me out soon. So imposter syndrome is alive and kicking. Yeah.
Do people know about this syndrome? This is a, it's like fat is a feminist issue, sort of issue from ancient archives of the second wave of feminism, which is that women at the cutting edge, doing in creative work and rising somehow up the ladder, wake up every morning, look in the mirror and say, they'll find me out in a minute.
Yeah.
In a minute, they'll know I don't know it. I really don't know it. I really can't tell you what a chi-square is, really. And they'll find out that I don't know what a chi-square is, and then it'll all be over, or whatever the topic is. And in my experience working with men all my career, I don't think they were ever infected by this particular ailment, but it's really, really big.
Yeah.
And essentially we did this in partnership, didn't we? We did it together.
Yeah, very much.
And
very much so.
It's your book, but I feel like, I was the midwife at the final moments of birthing here. And it's very empowering for me to do that. It was absolutely great.
It was a phenomenal journey. Yeah.
Just on that imposter syndrome, when I got my copy of the book, and I don't know if I contacted Becky, probably by that thing, social media or texting or something, I'm like, this is the contemporary text for community engagement. This is now, this is it. This is the one. She's like, oh no, but there was this one that was written like 10 years ago by a bloke somewhere that it's we don't want to say it's the one because that might have been the one. I'm like, no, this is the one, Becky. This is the now.
It's so lovely. And it's so lovely that you say that, but you know, I still think, oh, they're just humoring me. And to turn this, rather than this be a Becky therapy session, I think this is actually affecting our practice though as community engagement practitioners, because Wendy had mentioned to me a lot about some of the characters in the book that I talk about who are all real people. The ones that are anonymous, they're real people where I've just hidden their identity, but they are people out there, and they are typically, I'm going to say they're typically older men in suits that are putting down my practice, challenging me, questioning, saying I'm wrong. Now, this is as me as a professional. So I'm going into meetings with advisors or politicians, and I'm suggesting good ways to connect with communities and to engage. And time again, and I'm not just speaking for myself here, I think I'm speaking for community engagement practitioners probably around the world. We're being kind of told, no, that's not the way we do things, or that's naive, or that's silly, or that's soft and fluffy. And so actually this imposter syndrome, whilst I think it's something that probably affects a lot of us personally, I think it's affecting our sector as well and the work that we want to do.
And I find that we have to defend our practice all the time. And I find, you know, how you're describing these people, I'm thinking of people that I've worked with over my career as well, Becky, and it's very convenient for them to say no and to get us to defend the practice that we're wrapping around their projects. And I don't know, I've gotten to the point more recently where it's like, walk away, because, you know, I'm trying to make your projects better. Let's have greater social outcomes. It can get too hard, but you got to fight the fight, right? You got to do the work. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
We do the work because it comes from in here, and that's really come through your book, like wholeheartedly. It is for the love of community engagement. Now, there's some comments coming through chat. I did see someone asking where to buy the book from.
Well, yeah, I just saw that question. Rita, I'm not sure where you are in the world. If you're in Australia, I hate to say it, but Amazon right now has got the best price on it. I think the recommended retail price is around $29.99. They've got it at $27 at the moment, plus your postage. And they've got it in stock, which is amazing. Amazon have seen that this book is flying off the shelves, and so they've actually bought some copies. So Amazon Australia definitely is the place at the moment. Otherwise, the ISBN and everything is on the website for theloveofcommunityengagement.com. And I've put various links depending on where you are in the world. Amazon UK and Amazon Canada are being a bit slow at the moment.
Oh no, Amazon Canada's done it finally.
Finally. Yeah.
It's good, or I wouldn't have it. No, Amazon Canada's got copies, no problem.
Yeah, fab.
We've got a comment in chat from Virtual Meeting Room 11. Someone mustn't be in Melbourne. Oh no, actually maybe they're in the Virtual Meeting Room in
Virtual Meeting Room 11. I love it.
This conversation is exactly what I needed. It is amazing to hear such esteemed women talk about and recognise imposter syndrome. Oh, we could talk a little bit more about that. Give us a call and we can
talk all day on it.
We can take, Vivian. Oh, okay. There's a lot there from Vivian Twyford. We'll come back and look at that.
Oh, that gives me, when I just saw Vivian's name. Whew.
Vivian is, when you look at influential community engagement practitioners globally, we've got Wendy and we've got Vivian. We've got Desley, who's definitely on this call. We've got Becky. We've got Max Hardy. And I would like to say we've got Dr. Crispin Buttress, because he is my husband. But let's move on. I was thinking about the few people this morning, these champions. But Viv, we're going to come back to your comment. Becky, I've got a question for you. Have your say global pandemic, you consider this as paternalistic top-down engagement? Why do you dislike this so much? Like, you put something about it, I think, on LinkedIn, and it was almost like you were having a vomit on the page. You hated it that much.
This writing the book has almost been my kind of coming out process of this phrase. I hate it. And everybody is using it. That is the issue. Have a look at your local council, wherever you are in the world. Have a look at their website. I bet they've got a have your say. Have a look in the newspaper. There'll be something about have your say. Have a look at the next thing that you get invited to participate in your community. I bet you it says have your say. And you nailed it there, Amy, in the question. For me, it's paternalistic, it's top down. It's, we know we are the big boys and girls. We're the decision makers, and we've written something amazing. And we're now going to ask you to have your say on it. And for me, it almost brings up like anger. I mean, I don't analyze the English language, but there's something about it that makes it defensive to me. It straight away makes me imagine that to have your say, you're going to need to get your placards out here, and you're going to need to write some campaign like, we hate it. That's me having my say. So what I want to also highlight though, is that the have your say is simply, it's the symptom. It's just the tip of the iceberg. So the answer here, from my perspective, isn't about stopping using have your say. It's about looking at what's going on underneath your processes. So some people have said to me, what can we do to get away from this global pandemic of have your say? How lovely that we can use that term these days, global pandemic, and everybody gets it. I say you can change your language. You try to stop using that patronizing come and have your say language. You could change it to another 3-word slogan, like join the conversation, 2-word slogan, get involved. You could, but if fundamentally in your organization, say you're a local council, or you're a state government, or you're federal government, or you're a corporation, whoever you might be, it's probably likely that this is the actual setup, that it is about people having their say on something that you've developed, or that your typical decision makers want people to have their say on. So you need to actually have a look at the whole organization and the whole practice of engagement, rather than just addressing the 3-word catchphrase. But yes, I detest it. I almost want to start like a social media movement on it. So I think I'm going to say, anybody on this call or watching this video, if you see it somewhere, take a photo of it and send it to me, just for fun, because it kind of just irritates me, and I love it.
There's something about have your say that just gets my goat. And I know that some of our colleagues have actually used that in their practice. And it's not that. It's that, for example, with the Speak Out, when we invented the Speak Out, Andrea Cook and I, about 900 years ago, I had clients. I remember one client in Perth who said, oh, no, we can't call this a Speak Out. That's much too radical. So we'll call it a Have Your Say Day. And there's something about have your say that implies, okay, talk, do whatever you want, talk. We're not committed to listening. Just spread it around. Say whatever you want. Nobody's going to write it down. Nobody's going to put it in a report. We're certainly not going to have a meeting about it or make any decisions about what you say. So continue to run at the mouth, folks. Good luck to you. There's just such a demeaning quality to the desire not to have it be activist. You know, whatever you do, we don't have activists here. No, we're not doing that. We're very polite. We're very well managed. You have your say, and we'll just think about it. And we might get back to you, but maybe we won't either, because we're not making any promises. Just you cathart. And if you need to cry, well, here's a tissue. But basically, we're not committing to anything more than just the process of allowing you to speak. We're not even really saying we're listening. It's such a limited model.
You're right there, Wendy. Yeah, it isn't saying we're listening. I think that maybe that's the thing with the language, isn't it? It's not saying, come and have your say, we're listening. It's just have your say. And we've probably got a wall up. You can have your say as much as you like.
Deep listening is a very strong, this whole notion of deep listening is very strong at the moment amongst Aboriginal communities and First Nations communities. The idea that you're going to listen really deeply, trying to figure out what's the story underneath the story. Well, that's really different from just a little pissy have your say. So I love that you tackled that. And the other thing I really loved, while I'm on my soapbox, is I really loved that you took no prisoners with the senior bureaucrats. I mean, really, the way some of those people speak to engagement practitioners, you know, if it were being recorded, I mean, it would be just shameful. The dismissive, put down, professionally degrading way that people in this field are treated by the bureaucrats, sadly. Not so much the politicians, it's the bureaucrats.
Yeah, a couple of things on that. When my mum read the book, Wendy, and she said, she read it before it was published, and she said, do you think you've been a bit harsh on the bureaucrats? And I took everything my mum said, obviously, very seriously, all her notes that she sent through. And I did, tweak a few bits. But that one, I thought, no, actually, I haven't been too harsh. And since the book was published and is out in circulation, I've had one person said to me, like, not all local government is like what you experienced. And I think that's very true. And I think, there are champions for change within local councils. And all of us on the call, all of us here, we're all trying to shift this. But I just had to write my stories and what I've experienced and my sort of transactions, if you like, with my clients. And yeah, I did hold no prisoners and I was harsh, but somebody had to say it.
Just going back to Viv's comment, Viv said, she just referenced paragraph 5 on page 13, but she said, but changing things requires a change in mindsets, politician mindsets, bureaucratic mindsets of bosses, experts, professionals. Working with to help change mindsets is what is needed. Thanks for adding to this desire to make change and providing guidance and actions to support genuine collaboration. And it goes on. But a great comment there from Viv. Just scrolling through at the moment, there's a few questions there I'll come back to, and we've also got a question in the Q&A I'll come to as well. But actually what I'm going to do is questions from everyone. I've got more questions, but questions from the floor, drop them in chat, drop them in the Q&A, and we'll get to them. But I'd like to announce that we've got a door prize, the Zoom Room door prize. Not actually sure which way the Zoom door is, but it's somewhere around here. And our call to action is a love letter from you as participant here at the launch today to community engagement. And in chat right now, or a little bit later on, you've got until we finish up in about 26 minutes time to create your 1 to 2 sentence love letter to community engagement. And Becky is going to choose the best, which sings to her heart. And the door prize is a copy of For the Love of Community Engagement, and also a copy of Wendy's book, Speak Out, which if you don't have Becky's got, of course she's got it there. It's an awesome book. It's so practical. It's so practical. I think 13 years ago, I did my first Speak Out in Coburg using that book as my Bible, and it was in draft format at that time. So
Right.
Awesome book. So 1 to 2 sentence love letter for focusing on the love of community engagement. Tiffany's just put some words in chat there.
Amy, can I go back to your, you read out some of Viv's comment, and I've seen a couple of others come up. I just wanted to talk about very briefly, a lot of us are saying, this what I'm proposing, my dream, is around a total shift of the way that we engage and a total rethink. However, I want to acknowledge how far we've come, and particularly Australia, how far we've come in the last couple of decades. When I arrived 14 years ago, here 15, if you count the backpacking, 16, 17, we didn't have all of the kind of procedures and protocols, and we didn't have the knowledge and awareness of community engagement across government that we do have now. So I want to point out that we have come so far, and we can do this. And I'm not talking about quick change here. I'm talking about decades worth of change. But I believe, I firmly think it's possible. We've got this far in this century so far. I really think in the next 10, 20 years, we can shift it. We can do it. I've got to be positive like that. But I really think we can, because we've done so much good work so far. All of us, yeah. Everybody has.
Yeah. And it's also just the language that we use as well. I had a meeting yesterday, and I kid you not, the bureaucrat in my meeting kept saying, when we talk, and I go, listen to the community. And when we're going to talk to the community, we're going to listen to the community. I said it 7 times in 45 minutes. Listen, we're listening to the community. And I think, we just have to, like, it's a utopia moment if you've watched that TV show. But I think we've just got to persevere with it as well. Great question here from Danuki. Hi, Danuki. Danuki is in Melbourne, in lockdown somewhere. She said, how could we influence decision makers to allocate resources to drive genuine engagement practices? Now, Danuki is in Department of Premier and Cabinet with quite a large coordination role across state government in Victoria. So, Becky, any words of wisdom for Danuki?
So repeat the question there for me. It was about how can we persuade them to allocate resources?
How could we influence decision makers to allocate resources to drive genuine engagement practice?
Oh, I mean, that's a big question, isn't it? How can we influence? I mean, by going on what the book talks about, the book talks about from the community perspective, that's sort of from the bottom up, of communities getting involved and influencing decision makers. And I think maybe in our own practice, we need to do a bit of the same. We need to keep this best practice, high quality community engagement front of these people's minds. We need to empower our communities, the people in the community, the voters, might I remind these people, that they want good engagement to happen. So I think, that it kind of like needs to be a multi-pronged approach that we come at these people. This is my contribution, go and quote the book to them, go and whatever angle it takes to get these people seeing that they need resources allocating to it. And I'll note that the biggest resource for me that's needed in community engagement is not the money so much. I think I talk about this somewhere in the book about, what if you had $50 budget? Well, it doesn't cost anything to go and chat to somebody outside on the street. For me, the biggest resource I would like to see allocated is time. I would like more time allocated to enable good engagement. I talk a lot in the book about a community immersion experience or process that I go through whenever I'm working with a community. But in all honesty, as a consultant, I rarely have the time to actually go and get to know a community. And this is where we're going wrong. We're not immersing ourselves, getting to understand the TikTok of that community and how it operates, where people go, who are the leaders in that community, who needs to be involved. And that takes time. So community engagement these days is often so rushed. And that again comes back to that top-down bureaucratic, heavy kind of like have your say in the next 2 weeks approach. Just doesn't work. So time I'd like to see more of. So sorry, that hasn't quite answered your question, but lots of angles, but particularly from the bottom up within our sector. Let's keep talking about the good practice.
Wendy, speaking stick is coming over your way.
I'd like to say something about timing too. I mean, if I had $1 for every time I complained that the consultation was pretty much going to take place on Boxing Day, and then the rest of the consultation would be on January, and then the final community meeting would be like the day before Australia Day, something like that. And so I would fire off my enraged complaints and say that I would refuse to tender. And, I'd email it to the person, and I'd get a bounce back email saying they'd already gone on their holidays, right? And the tender was due, on December the 24th. So there's something about timing here. There's something, it's a game, it's a trick, it's a ploy, it's a way of keeping us from going deeply and finding out what's really, really going on. And just as an example, if everybody wanted to think for a moment about the Queen Street Mall in Brisbane, what do you think about the seating there on a hot day? Top of mind, front of brain, quick response. Knee-jerk response. Most of us have been to the Queen Street Mall, some of us in the summer. We can think of a couple of things. But if you say, look, how about in the next X months, anybody who's anywhere in Southeast Queensland or Northern New South Wales, go to the mall, then let's have a big conversation. Here's a bunch of questions, right? What I've got in the front of my brain is not worth anything, really. I'm facile, I can talk. It's not really any depth. But when you really look at a question like that, and then you go there and you notice that, 78% of the seating is commodified, right? Mm. So you have to spend in order to sit in the shade on the mall, right? And the seating that's not commodified is in the sun, right? It's bare or it's in the rain. And I think this idea that you have to do things fast it's a kind of a tricky thing, because what you get is shallow. You go shallow, you get shallow. You go fast, you get quick. You get top of mind. What we really want is deep, deep inside. What we really want is basically people spilling their guts. And they're not going to do that if you don't have a relationship with them. Mm. And if you don't do that, then you get whole communities that just are so pissed off. They're never going to cooperate. And then we're in remediation work, and that's horrible. Really trying to rebuild trust when you're even wondering if your dodgy client's trustworthy. So I think the speed is not accidental. All of these tenders that come out on, January the 10th for or December the 10th for consultations in January. No, I don't think it's all accidental, not after all these years of seeing that. And then they say, and the other thing is, of course, people don't respond. And so then we conclude that they are apathetic.
Yeah. So true. So true. Yeah. Yeah. I'll just add to that. I saw that Barbara had commented from Adelaide City Council, I think, about time is money. So if we want more time, then it does come back to the budget. And I totally agree. And I'm in a situation at the moment where with my own practice, I occasionally from time to time, I sub-consult into say a planning team. But more and more I'm seeing that the community engagement is still that afterthought, and there isn't the time or the money allocated to any good community engagement. And I'm now measuring that on how much time is allocated, and it is still getting rushed through. So almost we're not all in a position where we can be saying no to work. I feel quite lucky to now be in the position where I can turn things down. But when I turn things down, I now always make a point about the time. I say, I'm sorry. And genuinely right now, I'm currently working for October. So we don't operate on are you available to facilitate a meeting, a really important meeting next week? That's not my style. And that's not any community engagement practitioner's style. So I guess the more we can kind of place that, you want good engagement, you've got to plan it 6 to 8 months out in advance for really good, decent engagement. I've just put a figure on it there, but yeah, it needs more emphasis.
Thank you. And just a couple of comments here. Megan has put in the Q&A just about it's more than just a transaction, it's longer term. And that's where we're seeing government engagement, which is, this stop-start. We're going to start on this date and we're stopping on this date. Maybe it's over a holiday period or over Christmas. And then probably whatever you contribute in that transactional period will go into a black hole. You'll never hear from us again. Relationships with community need to be ongoing. You don't choose when you have a relationship with someone. There's either a relationship there or not a relationship there. And that's something that I emphasize to my clients all the time. It shouldn't be about turning things on and turning things off. It needs to be on all the time, but there might be conversations with purpose within that time. But most excitingly, we've got some love letters. I'm just going to read out one from Emily. My darling community engagement. Every time we're together, my heart sings at the stories we are so fortunate to hear and the opportunities you give for people to feel heard and connected to the community they love. Tears. Oh my God. And there's more, but I'll just read out one because people want that door prize, but they also really love community engagement. Okay, in the Q&A, we've got a question from Max. I'm sure you find it motivating, though, to be told it's not the way we do things. Isn't that the greatest sign that you're making a positive change?
No, I don't think this is Max Hardy. I think this might be Max Mason. Perhaps they can confirm in the chat who, I'm trying to work out who this is. So the question was that you get people saying no kind of drives you more.
That's it. Yeah.
Well, and in all honesty,
sorry, Becky, that you are creating a positive change. It's a sign that if they're saying that to you, yeah.
Maybe it is. And to be honest, if all these bureaucrats hadn't been so, hesitant about it, I wouldn't have had a book to write. So thank you to them all for giving me the content and the stories for the book. But yeah, I guess the more you feel resistance, the more you're out there. It would be occasionally nice though for them to say, great idea, let's do it. And to be honest, they do, don't they? They do. Some of us are doing some great engagement, but we need to see more of it, and we need to see more of it in the mainstream. Absolutely mainstream.
Just a comment Eleanor made, it was sort of, if you scroll up in the chat, I saw it before, but it was about how some people that we work with, or some of our clients, they do want to listen genuinely, but they don't know what they're listening for or the questions that they're asking. Have you got any comments on that? Because this is an ongoing challenge, because I think within their organisations, it's like, oh, okay, the policy says I need to engage on the master plan, so I'm here to listen, but what am I listening for?
Oh, and again, this is a huge topic, and I find that often I have a skill, and possibly we all have the same skill of being able to hone down exactly what it is that we're trying to determine. And this is one of the things of good engagement. We need to understand why we're asking the questions and what's negotiable in our conversation, and really those the outputs that we're looking for. But that's not a skill that apparently comes to everybody. I didn't realize this until the last few years, that our skills are actually quite unique. And so I guess the more that we can help people to firstly have a really good conversation, and secondly to really do that deep listening and try and get to know the people, and that whole chapter about the underdog, really being interested in their story, and that they're pushing against conventional, they're pushing against what you're proposing even. I think the more that we can kind of be helping people in that stuff, as well as actually giving them some really clear, if we're going to be going down this avenue, some real clear guidelines as to the conversation that we're trying to have and what information we're trying to get from people, then that's all going to help, I guess. But it is a struggle for a lot of people. It all comes back, to really simple conversations and listening and just kind of being in the moment. Yeah.
Another love letter here from Julia. Go forward in confidence. Walking in love and having faith with everything is for you. If it doesn't work out how you thought it would, trust that this is the path forward, and you have made a difference, and you have been a positive role model. So some great love letters coming in there. Now we've got a question from Christy, who in the Q&A. If everyone can just open up the Q&A window, you might want to do that, Becky, too, because there's a little mini paragraph before we get to the actual question. But the question is, do you have any advice for community members who aren't getting the traction we are demanding to be heard?
Oh, for community members, I feel for you. And I think this is where a lot of the stuff with Engage to Act I really enjoyed, that we not only operated as a network of professionals, but that we included people that are passionate about community engagement. Because I really feel here, Wendy might have some stuff to add to this, but we as professionals working in this space need to walk hand in hand with community who are affected by this stuff. And we are all singing from the same hymn sheet. And so if we can kind of unite and we can support community to really, and when I'm saying community, I mean the general public that are interested, that are trying to be heard, if we can educate them about what good engagement looks like, we give them the tools and we give them the confidence, and even they will have some imposter syndrome, I would have thought, going on, like, oh, maybe we are silly community, or whatever people get called, silly people getting angry about stuff. Maybe we are just NIMBYs. I really want to see us doing more education to the public and supporting the general public to demand high quality community engagement. So I have no simple answer, but yeah, that we support the community.
Wendy, have you got a comment there?
Yes, I do. This is the $64,000 question. This one, I think. It's really, really hard question, because we've got this problem in our work of the principal actor dilemma. So we're often speaking on behalf of somebody else down the line, say in a public-private partnership, or a developer out there somewhere, or a government body somewhere. And so it's often difficult for us to genuinely help communities become politicized and empowered. And I think there's a real value in your triangle, Amy. I really love when you tackled, the endless debate about the spectrum and the wheel and the circle and the continuum, and then we got the triangle. I'm a great fan of the triangle because it's about relationships and about building relationships. And I think that capacity strengthening is absolutely, we should never go into a community without giving something. And they're going to have to tell us what it is. We can't determine that ahead of time. But I would hate to think that we would go in and they would then be even more deficient, even less empowered, and more depressed and discouraged. And you really got to work at that. On what I thought was one of my best jobs, 2 residents, both of whom are dead now, but they became very good friends of mine, sat me down after this project had collapsed after the global financial crisis and said something like this: Wendy, we really love you and we think you did your best. And we think that 2 of our elderly friends died of broken hearts because of this community renewal project. And you were the face of it, Wendy. You know, now there's a lot in that, including a lot of trust that they would say it and a lot of trust that I would hear it. But I believe it was true. You know, that we are always skating on the edge of betrayal here in the work that we do. We make the best damn promises that we can. And we're really careful, I think, about what we promise. And then Goldman Sachs in New York takes out a Melbourne builder and a Sydney project falls over completely. And it ends up all barbed wire and broken hearts and 2 dead old women. So, you know, this is grown up stuff. And just to say to you, Becky, I didn't realize when we started what I was getting into. And I mean, it was such an alarmingly refreshing thing to be sitting here, you know, late at night with my head in your manuscript going, this is what courage looks like. Like, we can't rest on our laurels because it's a mess. It's a serious political mess, community engagement everywhere. I've just done a big survey here in Vancouver. I'm trying to get the energy together to analyze it now, of members of a long-standing residents association here, and their attitudes towards the city's engagement processes during the pandemic. It's not fit to print. I mean, people are hysterical. And when you look at the demographics, they're people who've been here 20, 30, 40 years, and they've watched this for decades. And the city of Vancouver is ecstatic that they can be online. They never have to smell those revolting people again. They don't have to smell them. So, you know, that we're on the edge of betrayal all the time. Every time we enter, there's an expectation of betrayal, and we'd be silly not to acknowledge it's real.
Okay, we've got about 5 more minutes together, everyone. I'm going to read out one more love letter. This one's from Barbara. Community engagement. You are an awakening in current times to the collective consciousness of past periods in humanity, where we genuinely embodied the belief that it takes a village to create a functional and balanced community of inclusiveness and true equity. I love you for this, for offering the potential to bring this back. That of my soul yearns, and I am proud to be in the process of becoming a true doula for this awakening. Oh, gosh, I don't know. We're in lockdown here in Melbourne at the moment. We needed this today. This is amazing. Just a couple more questions, Becky. Oh, first of all, Becky and Wendy, so much wisdom here. What are your 3 bits of advice to the audience here today, or who are watching this later on, about, you know, loving community engagement and moving forward in this relationship that we have? So, Wendy, I'll throw to you first. 3 bits of advice.
I had a wonderful friend who died very young. Some of you might have known him, Kevin Taylor. He was a landscape architect. And he was a very modest and understated, beautiful spiritual man. And what he taught me was that he would go into community engagement processes, which he did a lot in his landscape practice, Taylor Cullity Lethlean, and be his modest self, and be his modest, unassuming. Nobody really knew. I remember at his funeral, his partner saying he was our secret weapon. He was our secret. So what I would say is you can still only be yourself. You know, the idea that in a community engagement setting, you can be bigger than you are, or smarter, or broader in your understanding. We're still only ourselves. And I think the more that community members see us, you know, my finest moment, and I'll end with this, was in Eagleby in Queensland years ago, where a member of the community residents group came up to me and said, "Wendy, you will have to get rid of that pink dress. Lose the pink dress, Wendy. You look like the mother of the bride." And I thought, right, we're getting somewhere here. I'm not Dr. Wendy. I'm the person in the horrible pink dress, and I took it to the Goodwill the next day. So that's what we want. We need to create some sorts of conversations that are more authentic, but we can only do it by being ourselves.
And Becky, your advice?
Did you say 3 key takeaways? Can I have 4?
Yeah, why not?
Well, number 1, we've talked about a lot. Let's stop using have your say. Let's and use that as the symptom. Let's treat the whole thing, but we can observe our success by whether people are using the phrase have your say. Let's get rid of it. Secondly, we haven't talked much today about, but it's all in the book, so you can read it, public initiated participation. I really want to see, I want organizations to be coming to me saying, Becky, we're looking at really trying to put citizens and their needs and their interests back at the center of what we do. And we want to give opportunity for community to actually drive our agenda more. So this is game-changing stuff. It's big, radical, utopian stuff, but that's really a direction I want to be heading in. My third one would be, if you don't love it, don't do it. I think what this book has perhaps, and Amy, as I mentioned in the acknowledgements, you know, it was you that stormed into that room one day saying, we need more passion back in community engagement. We need more love. We need to understand why we're doing this. And I really want any practitioners that are out there that don't get those goosebumps when they see people working together for the good of communities, let's find you another occupation. Let's really get back to the people working in this sector being the ones that love it. And I think most of us do. My bonus one is that I truly believe, now this is my big, bold, overly confident Becky, but I'm not going to have any imposter syndrome on this. This book contains the solution for world peace. It really does. Community engagement and our approaches to getting the right people at the table and debating the issue at hand and finding a solution is what the world needs at all levels. And I've been thinking about all examples on a global stage, and it's relevant for everything. So world peace is what we're addressing. Wendy loves that. See, she's like firing me up. So those are my 4.
Thank you. And we're leaving this on a high. Becky, who won the door prize? The 2 books.
I have scrolled back. I love Elisa. She said engagement specialists are red, but their faces sometimes blue because they're driving genuine change, which means empowerment of you.
Okay, Alyssa, if you could get in contact with us, we will get those books to you. Before we finish up though, Becky, I would like you to read from the final chapter of For the Love of Community Engagement and share the dream. Thanks.
Thank you. So this chapter, when we edited it, I remember the moment, and Wendy came back to me and she said, I love what you've written, but I'm going to turn it a bit more Martin Luther King. And so we edited it around and we turned it into my dream. I'm now about halfway through my career, 22 years under my belt, and hopefully at least another 22 years to go. As the media article in Image 30 reveals, I'm now asking myself this question: am I making a difference? I believe I am, because my work offers people a space to be heard and to have critically important conversations. But my current reality is a far cry from my dream. My dream. I dream of a gigantic shift. I dream that decision makers will shift from simply consulting with communities because they are required to embodying a new ethic, and in their strong voices saying, I want to make really good, considered decisions. And for that to occur, I know that I need to have the right people involved. Or even better, I dream of them saying, before we proceed any further on this idea, have we discussed it with the relevant local communities? What do they think needs to happen? Let's take our time to find out. And if we're going for my absolute wildest fantasy, in my heartfelt dream, future community engagement scenarios will resonate with words like this. We, members of various communities, know there's an issue with X. We want to discuss it to decide the best way forward. That includes having the government at our table to support us as we develop our vision and our plan to tackle it. Hearing words like that would rock my world, and it would take us right back to those days in 1945, where in my community, local people decided they wanted a local hospital. And so what did they do? They began building one. I dream of more robust conversations, not just at the local level, but at national and global levels. I dream of meeting politicians and leaders who aren't afraid to start the difficult conversations that face our generation. I dream of clear evidence of courage and guts demonstrated through greater connection and collaboration. I dream of honest acknowledgement that the soft skills are the hard skills. I dream of community engagement becoming something more all-encompassing, a combination of community engagement with concepts of community development, community leadership, community resilience building, rather than the project-by-project, simplistic and bureaucratic have your say cookie cutter approaches that currently dominate the engagement landscapes that I travel through. My dream is one of thriving communities. We can't get to my dream via helicopter engagement. My dream emerges from deeply rich and respectful connections with and amongst people, groups, and communities and government. My dream is of loud and proud community engagement practitioners across the world. I dream of the day where the concept of community engagement is as mainstream as bricklaying, where I can make small talk with people at parties about my work without them looking blankly at me in return. I dream of people being treated as people, communities being treated with the respect and recognition they deserve, and our leaders being open, transparent, and empathic. I long for more conversation, collaboration, and connectedness for the love of community engagement. Thank you.
And with that, we are officially launched. Becky, your book is launched. So
yay! Thank you so much.
Thank you for everyone for participating in this webinar today. Please use the hashtag if you've got any messages or reviews for Becky. Thank you, Wendy. Enjoy the rest of your evening in Vancouver, and we'll see you all next time. We are launched, everyone, for the love of community engagement.
Thanks, everybody. And thank you, Amy. Fantastic emceeing. Bye, everybody.